For years, the world only saw the cheeky grin of a little royal prince. Photos captured him laughing beside his family, waving from palace balconies, and charming every crowd he met. But behind those towering palace gates, the mood was far heavier than anyone could imagine. Late-night whispers slithered down silent corridors, long-time staff quietly packed up and left, and a strange, heavy quiet settled over the household. That perfect royal image cracked when a palace psychologist raised alarms so serious they could shake the monarchy itself. What secrets had been locked away from the public eye, and why did so many inside the palace seem hesitant to speak? As the story slowly leaked, curiosity exploded. People began replaying old royal appearances, squinting for clues that might have been there all along. But to the public, Prince Louis looked flawless, smiling for cameras, tugging playfully on his mother's sleeve, and waving enthusiastically from balconies. Those moments made him a darling of royal watchers. Crowds laughed at his playful antics, but insiders quietly whispered about a different reality, a reality far more tangled than cheerful smiles suggested. Something heavy was stirring behind palace walls, a tension that staff felt but rarely discussed. While the public saw laughter and playful gestures, courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. Several insiders reported that Louis sometimes had emotional episodes that left staff scrambling. These moments were rarely mentioned outside private circles, but the whispers grew louder among those closest to him. Over time, employees with regular contact began leaving their posts. Official statements labelled them personal decisions, but palace insiders noticed something else: faces tired, eyes nervous, voices clipped. Their silence only fueled speculation. One former royal nanny eventually spoke anonymously. She recalled evenings when Louis seemed consumed with distress. Louis would cry for hours some nights, she said. Nothing could calm him. He wasn't throwing tantrums. He looked lost in his own thoughts. Her observations reportedly passed through official channels, only to vanish into layers of palace bureaucracy. She wasn't the only one sounding alarms. Insiders noticed unusual patterns. Unlike Prince George and Princess Charlotte, whose schedules were rigidly followed, Louis sometimes skipped appearances with little warning. Events planned for weeks suddenly went ahead without him. When he did show up, handlers hovered unusually close. Whispered reminders, subtle nudges, constant redirection. It looked normal to the casual eye, but those familiar with royal protocol noticed something different. Why the intense management? Behaviour specialists later zeroed in on footage from major royal events, particularly Jubilee celebrations. Analysts rewound clips again and again, dissecting every blink, twitch, and hand gesture. One detail jumped out. During loud applause, Louis sometimes stared blankly, distant and detached. Then, just as suddenly, he'd burst into loud laughter, switching reactions like a flicked switch. A specialist later explained that such behaviour can signal emotional overwhelm in children exposed to intense stimuli. Most kids in calm situations don't react like this, one analyst reportedly said. These reactions raised even more questions. Even more shocking, media coverage went mysteriously silent. Paparazzi usually swarm royal children, but photos and videos of Louis in sensitive moments seemed to vanish. Journalists later revealed that palace representatives sometimes requested images be withheld, officially, to protect a child's privacy, though some reporters privately described it as subtle but firm media control. Inside, the palace decided outside help was needed, a professional who could assess Louis privately and quietly. Enter Dr. K. Dr. K had a decades-long reputation for handling complex child development cases with high-profile families. Discreet, professional, and highly respected, she was the perfect choice to observe the situation under the radar. Officially, Dr. K was introduced as an educational consultant, innocuous enough to avoid scrutiny, but insiders knew her real mission: to monitor Prince Louis closely and evaluate his emotional well-being. For weeks, Dr. K watched him in public and private settings, tracking routines, reactions to crowds, interactions with family, and responses to stress. Her approach was meticulous, built on years of experience. Those close to the situation said her observations worried her deeply. She reportedly believed Louis was navigating an environment stacked with pressure, where appearances mattered more than comfort. The problem wasn't illness, it was emotional strain from life under constant royal scrutiny. At first, palace officials hoped her presence would quietly stabilize things, guiding supportive changes without drawing attention. But Dr. K's reputation for honesty meant her reports couldn't be sugar-coated. Her findings sparked urgent internal debate. Advisors discussed changes to schedules, public appearances, and support systems for Louis. Experts later said early clues had always been visible. What seemed like ordinary childhood energy now looked different under close inspection. Fidgeting, blank stares, sudden bursts of motion. Patterns emerged in archived footage. Some wondered, had the palace really missed these signs, or had they struggled with how to respond? From Louis's first appearances at events like Wimbledon, every move was carefully planned. Older siblings followed rehearsed routines flawlessly, standing straight, clapping, acknowledging crowds. Louis sometimes reacted differently, covering his ears, gazing into space, shifting restlessly, or making playful faces. The public laughed, calling it cute, but specialists now believe these gestures reflected sensory discomfort in noisy, high-pressure environments. During the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, Louis's expressions went viral. Social media buzzed with clips of his animated reactions. Audiences found it charming, but backstage, staff reportedly worked tirelessly to guide him, using subtle cues, gentle reassurance, and careful redirection to help him stay focused. These weren't random actions. Reports suggest it was a rehearsed strategy to support him under intense attention. Aides reportedly worried about how he reacted to bright lights, loud noises, and unpredictable crowds. Playful expressions were just the surface. Underneath, he sometimes froze or became overwhelmed during rehearsals. Rumors even suggested he occasionally needed extra comfort before major appearances. Quiet spaces, shorter appearances, and calming routines were introduced to help him cope. Some tense moments nearly leaked through accidental microphone recordings. One handler was reportedly heard saying, "Just keep him smiling." Another added, "Take him off the stage if he stares again." The clips never aired. Broadcast feeds cut away, and the footage vanished. But inside the palace, the tension kept building. Even royal press members were divided. Some prioritized the monarchy's reputation above all. Others quietly worried that protecting the image might be overshadowing the young prince's well-being. As discussions intensified, medical advisors recommended careful changes, longer breaks between public appearances, fewer events, and more flexible schedules for Prince Louis. But within a centuries-old institution built on tradition, adapting quickly proved incredibly difficult, as each adjustment seemed to challenge long-standing norms and expectations deeply embedded within palace life. One aide reportedly summarized the challenge bluntly: "The firm struggles with vulnerability, especially when the person involved wears a crown. Every decision carried dual weight, protecting a child while upholding centuries of royal tradition and public perception." Handlers continued guiding Louis meticulously during appearances, directing his waves, gently tapping his shoulder, whispering subtle reminders. These quiet interventions helped maintain order, but they also revealed how closely every moment of his life was managed. For an extended period, the palace maintained strict silence. The young prince continued appearing in public, while deeper concerns remained carefully concealed from view. Yet eventually, that silence began to fracture. Just when many believed the situation would remain private indefinitely, an unexpected voice emerged. The very expert brought in to quietly support the royal family suddenly altered the course of the story. Dr. K, the psychologist originally assigned to protect the young prince's well-being, made a decision that shocked many observers. Instead of remaining silent behind palace walls, she chose to speak openly about the challenges she had witnessed firsthand. Her words were calm, clinical, and measured, yet carried tremendous weight. They described an environment in which emotional needs sometimes struggled to compete with the relentless pressure of royal tradition and public image. Dr. K was no ordinary advisor. With over 2 decades of experience handling complex childhood trauma cases for prominent families worldwide, she had built a reputation for honesty, discretion, and fearless advocacy. When concerns surrounding Prince Louis could no longer be quietly ignored, she had been chosen precisely because of that reputation, for reliability, accuracy, and determination. She entered the palace not as a critic, but as a trusted professional, bound by confidentiality agreements and royal-level security clearance, arriving as a lifeline rather than an accuser. From the outset, Dr. K believed her sessions with Louis would be simple and routine. The palace had framed the meetings as brief evaluations, meant to quietly settle minor internal concerns and reassure staff that nothing serious was occurring. Initially, that expectation seemed reasonable. The sessions began as calm conversations and gentle observations, the kind of clinical assessments professionals conduct daily. But it didn't take long for Dr. K to realize that what she was witnessing was far more complicated than anyone inside the palace had anticipated. Sources who later spoke about the sessions claim the atmosphere quickly shifted. Instead of hearing the carefree voice of a privileged young child enjoying life in one of the world's most celebrated families, Dr. K reportedly encountered something entirely different. Louis's tone was soft, almost hesitant, as though he were searching for words to describe feelings he didn't fully understand himself. One source described it as the voice of a child attempting to speak while holding back a flood of emotions. During one session, Louis reportedly asked a question that stopped Dr. K in her tracks. In a quiet, almost fragile voice, he asked, "Why do I have to smile when I'm scared?" Those simple words carried a weight that immediately unsettled the psychologist. Children often ask difficult questions, but this one hinted at a deeper confusion about the expectations placed upon him. According to those familiar with the report, Louis spoke about loud crowds and flashing cameras in ways that suggested he was overwhelmed. Large public events reportedly made him feel trapped, surrounded by noise and attention he could not escape. At times, he seemed uncertain whether the smiles he gave were genuine or simply what he believed people expected of him. One comment he allegedly made lingered with Dr. K long after the session ended. "They only see me when I'm happy," he said quietly. The remark suggested emotional invisibility, not anger, but a quiet awareness that certain feelings were welcomed while others were ignored. Dr. K's notes emphasized that these moments were not dramatic outbursts, but subtle signals, early indicators that a young mind might be struggling to navigate an intense and demanding environment. In most circumstances, such signs would prompt careful support and professional intervention. Yet according to reviewers of the report, the palace's response appeared markedly different. Rather than reducing Louis's schedule, some officials reportedly pressed for continued appearances. Maintaining the image of a joyful and united royal family was deemed essential. Concerned by what she observed, Dr. K reportedly approached senior officials with a direct request: reduce Louis's public appearances temporarily. She explained that the young prince needed calm, predictable environments in which to develop emotionally without the constant pressure of cameras and crowds. Additional rehearsals, photo opportunities, and public events, she argued, would only increase his stress. She recommended specialized clinical support and structured care to ensure he felt safe and secure. Yet every time she raised these concerns, the responses remained distant and cautious. Officials reminded her that the public expected to see a unified family. The facade of joy, they argued, preserved confidence in the institution. Dr. K reportedly sensed a quiet fear beneath these polished explanations, an apprehension that acknowledging vulnerability could invite public and media scrutiny. Weeks passed, and the sessions continued. Over time, she noted subtle shifts in Louis's behavior. His once lively energy sometimes faded into long stretches of quiet reflection. He avoided eye contact more frequently and appeared withdrawn in certain interactions. One telling moment recorded in her report captured the emotional strain clearly. Discussing upcoming events, Louis reportedly murmured, "I want to go somewhere quiet, but there's always a camera." The statement was simple, yet revealed how deeply constant attention weighed upon him. After hearing that, Dr. K reportedly reached a difficult conclusion. Continuing her work while her recommendations were dismissed would mean silently condoning a situation she believed required serious attention. She realized she could no longer accept her assigned role quietly. The palace apparently expected her departure to be discreet, as consulting professionals often leave without public attention. Many assumed this situation would follow the same pattern. But what happened next surprised almost everyone. Within hours of her resignation, a copy of Dr. K's final internal report began circulating among professionals in a global child mental health network. It was not sent to tabloids or rival institutions, but reached a specialized community that fully understood the seriousness of her concerns. When reviewed, experts described the document as a call for accountability rather than retaliation. Its tone remained professional, clinical, and methodical, yet the conclusions were impossible to ignore. The report highlighted a pattern within the royal environment where emotional needs sometimes appeared secondary to public presentation. It outlined systemic concerns about handling sensitive situations, suggesting that maintaining a flawless public image sometimes overshadowed the genuine needs of a growing child. Dr. K's decision to release the report was motivated by protection, not conflict. The effect was dramatic. For the first time in decades, a royal controversy emerged unrelated to finances, relationships, or political disputes. Instead, it centered on the delicate emotional well-being of a young member of the royal family. Attention quickly turned to the contents of the report. Why had palace operations tightened? Why were discussions happening behind closed doors? Though the language remained strictly medical, its implications were striking. Louis was reported to have a rare neurological and emotional processing condition. For privacy, the precise diagnosis was never publicly revealed. The report outlined patterns of social withdrawal, sensitivity to stimulation, and intense emotional reactions. None of these traits defined him as incapable or unwell in the traditional sense. On the contrary, it emphasized his intelligence, curiosity, and strong communication skills in calm settings. Yet under pressure, his reactions could shift rapidly, from composed and focused to overwhelmed by noise or flashing cameras. Dr. K described these responses as coping mechanisms to handle excessive stimulation. Each time he performed in public, he did remarkably well, but at a significant psychological cost. Her methodology was thorough, documenting behavior patterns, communication styles, and environmental triggers over weeks. The central conclusion was simple: Louis needed stability, predictable routines, emotional reassurance, and a supportive structure. Yet royal life offered the opposite: crowds, cameras, formal expectations, and constant scrutiny. One sentence buried in the report gained enormous attention. If left unaddressed, the situation may evolve into an identity conflict with broader institutional implications. These words suggested the concern extended far beyond one child. Even minor cracks could carry symbolic consequences in an institution built on tradition and carefully maintained perception. The monarchy's succession depends on public confidence, which relies on strength, composure, and reliability. What happens if a young royal quietly struggles under that expectation? What happens if the system designed to support him intensifies the pressure instead? Dr. K's report presented a moment of choice: embrace openness and compassion, or maintain silence to protect tradition. According to insiders, the palace chose a different path. Instead of transparency, it reportedly shifted into crisis management mode. Leaked emails, media coordination, and strategically timed public appearances suggested efforts to reshape the narrative before speculation could spread. Within hours, Kensington Palace began releasing cheerful images of Prince Louis in family photos and casual outings. He appeared walking beside Catherine, laughing with his siblings, and enjoying relaxed moments in palace gardens. At first glance, the scenes appeared warm and natural, but insiders reported that many images were prearranged with select photographers under strict confidentiality. The goal was clear: replace concern with reassurance. By flooding media channels with positive imagery, officials aimed to redirect attention away from sensitive questions. Headlines returned to familiar themes: playful expressions, funny royal moments, and charming family interactions. Online commentary quickly filled with light-hearted discussion about Prince Louis's funniest faces and the cheeky royal who steals the show. For casual observers, the strategy worked. The focus returned to entertainment rather than speculation. Yet for those aware of Dr. K's report, the contrast was striking. Behind the cheerful images, serious conversations about emotional support and institutional responsibility continued quietly. And that is where the story deepens. Even if only part of Dr. K's concerns are accurate, this situation represents far more than a family matter. It raises questions about how powerful institutions handle vulnerability and whether public image sometimes outweighs private well-being. Today, the biggest question is no longer only what Prince Louis might be experiencing. It is how far the palace may go to control the narrative. Will the monarchy embrace openness and modern transparency, or will the tradition of silence prevail? For now, many questions remain unanswered. What is clear is that this story continues to unfold, with new developments possible at any moment. If you've been following this situation and want to stay informed, share your thoughts and reactions below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with every update as we uncover what might happen next regarding Prince Louis and the future of the royal family.